The airport was bustling with the usual mid-morning rush, passengers wheeling suitcases, gate announcements crackling over the intercom, and flight crews moving with purpose. Jenna Morales waited at gate 14B, earbuds in, backpack slung over one shoulder. She glanced at the boarding screen. Flight 619 to Seattle. On time. Good. It had been 2 years since she'd last sat in a cockpit. 2 long, bitter years since she walked away from her dream of flying commercial jets. After her father died, she couldn't find the heart to finish flight school. Everything had reminded her of him. His proud eyes when she aced her flight exam. His voice on the phone every time she called from the simulator. Even the smell of jet fuel. She dropped out, packed up her logbooks, and tried to start over, but flying still haunted her. She still checked air traffic control frequencies online for fun, still followed aviation pages, and she always chose a window seat always. Seat 22A. On Flight 619 gave her that familiar view. She leaned her forehead against the glass as the plane began taxiing, watching the wing flex and shudder over the tarmac. Somewhere in her stomach, something stirred, not fear, not excitement, just memory. She looked out at the blue August sky and whispered, "You'd love this view, Dad." The plane took off smoothly. The captain's voice came over the speakers. With the usual greeting, altitude, flight time, weather in Seattle. Jenna tuned it out. She opened her phone's gallery, scrolling through old photos of her in uniform, grinning beside a small Cessna, laughing with her instructor mid-flight. Selfie with sunglasses too big for her face. She smiled sadly. That life felt distant now. A person she barely remembered being an hour into the flight. Turbulence started. It was light at first, nothing out of the ordinary. A few bumps, a wobble here and there. The woman beside Jenna clutched. Her coffee a little tighter. Jenna didn't even blink. She knew this kind of chop was routine. But then, something shifted. The plane dipped hard to the left. Not turbulence. A sharp drop. Gasps echoed through the cabin. Then screams. Luggage bins popped open. A crying baby shrieked from row 18. Jenna's fingers gripped her armrest. She looked out the window. What she saw turned her blood cold. Left engine was on fire. Flames shot out from under the wing in wild bursts. Smoke trailed behind like a banner. And the engine wasn't just flaming, it was shaking, rattling violently against the wing strut. That engine was about to fail. The overhead oxygen masks dropped. Panic exploded in the cabin. People fumbled with their masks. Others cried or yelled. One man tried to stand, but collapsed back into his seat as the plane shook again. A flight attendant rushed down the aisle, pale and wide-eyed, yelling over the intercom, "Remain calm. Please stay in your seats. Masks on." Jenna's breath quickened, but not from fear. From calculation. She knew what a flaming engine meant, knew what would come next. Instructors drilled it into her brain. Fire, fuel loss, possible engine failure, reduced thrust, emergency descent. She looked up. No announcements. Nothing from the cockpit. That was strange. She pushed her mask on and reached under her seat for the emergency card. She didn't need it, but she needed to keep her hands moving. Then the intercom cracked. The voice was different. Not calm. Not collected, if there is. Anyone on board with any flight experience, any pilot training, please make yourself known to the crew immediately. It was a male voice, shaky, desperate. And that's when Jenna knew something had gone terribly wrong up front. The pilots were either injured, or worse. Her stomach flipped. Not with fear, but urgency. Her training didn't vanish with time. It kicked in, muscle memory, flight instinct. Her heart raced as she unbuckled her seatbelt. The woman next to her grabbed her sleeve. "Where are you going?" Jenna didn't answer. She squeezed past, into the aisle, pushing through terrified passengers. A flight attendant tried to block her. "Ma'am, you have to sit. I trained to fly," Jenna said. "I'm not. Just a passenger." The attendant blinked, stunned. Another violent jolt rocked the plane. A food cart tipped and slammed into the wall. "Let me through," Jenna said louder. "I've flown before. Where's the cockpit?" The attendant hesitated then. Pointed past first class. Jenna ran. Every step felt surreal. She hadn't been inside a cockpit since her last simulator check ride, but her mind was sharp. Her training surged forward, unburied like muscle memory rising from the grave. She reached the door. It was open. Smoke leaked from the paneling. Inside, the scene was worse than she expected. The captain sat slumped, gripping his arm with blood streaming from his forehead. The co-pilot was slumped completely sideways, unconscious. Alarms screamed from the control panel. Warning lights flashed everywhere. The captain turned his head. "Barely. You?" he rasped. "You a pilot?" "Student. Flight school. 4 semesters. 180 logged hours," Jenna replied instantly. "Sim time in 737 and 757. He nodded. "We've got fire. Lost pressure. I can't fly this alone." Jenna stepped forward, heart pounding. She reached for the co-pilot's chair and slid in. In one moment, everything changed. She was no longer just a girl in seat 22A. She was the last chance flight 619 had to survive. Jenna's hands trembled as they hovered above the controls. Everything in front of her was alive, with sound-blaring alarms, warning lights, blinking errors across the dashboard. But somehow, her brain filtered through the noise. She focused on what mattered. "Talk to me," she said to the captain as she pulled the headset over her ears. The captain groaned. "Engine 1's gone. Electrical systems partially failed. We're on emergency power, and we're losing hydraulics." She glanced at the gauges. Fuel pressure in Engine 1 was gone completely. Engine 2 was sputtering, still running, but under strain. Autopilot? Offline. Manual only. She inhaled slowly. "Okay." Jenna didn't wait for permission. She reached forward and grabbed the control yoke with both hands, feeling the vibration from the struggling aircraft shiver through her arms. The co-pilot beside her remained motionless, his chest rising and falling just barely. She looked to the captain. He was pale, sweating, and visibly trying to stay awake. "Sir, are you able to assist at all?" He blinked slowly. "Barely. You'll need to fly. I'll talk, if I can." She nodded. Jenna Morales, a former aviation student who had walked away from the skies, was now in full control of a Boeing 737 carrying 181 souls. She looked down at the radio. "Which channel for a TC?" The captain coughed, then croaked, "Center frequency, 134.75. She adjusted the radio and keyed the mic. "Seattle Center, this is Flight 619, declaring emergency. Engine 1 is lost. Flight controls damaged." "This is not a drill." The response came after a long pause. "Flight 619, confirm identity." "Who's speaking?" Jenna hesitated. Then, "This is a civilian in the cockpit. My name is Jenna Morales. Former flight student. The co-pilot is unconscious. The captain is injured. I am in control of the aircraft." There was silence on the other end. And the controller's voice returned, this time slower, measured, tense. "Copy that, Jenna. You are authorized to continue. Maintain current heading. We're locating your nearest emergency option. Stand by." She exhaled sharply. The weight of what she was doing finally registered. She was flying a crippled jetliner, live mid-air, mid-crisis, and doing it alone. But she couldn't think like that. She remembered her instructor's words. Forget panic. Focus on the problem. So she did. Jenna began checking the critical systems. Flaps damaged, but usable. Gear manual deployment only. Engine 2 operating at 50% capacity. Altitude dropping gradually, but under control for now. She adjusted pitch slightly and reduced throttle to relieve strain on the remaining engine. Passenger cabin? She asked the captain. They're terrified. Flight attendants told me someone screamed the wing was on fire. It was. It's out now. Probably self-extinguished. We've lost the engine completely, though. Jenna tried to keep her voice calm. Not for the captain. He was half fading, but for herself. The moment she let fear in, it would take over. Seattle Center came back on the radio. Flight 619. Your nearest possible emergency landing is Kalispell Airport, 83 miles west. Runway. Length is 4,700 feet. It's tight, but possible. Alternative options are over 120 miles. Fuel status? She scanned the gauges. Her eyes narrowed. Fuel remaining is approximately 20 minutes at current consumption. Kalispell will be tight, but reachable. Request vectors. Roger that. Turn heading 262. Begin gradual descent to 12,000 feet. Emergency crews will be waiting. Jenna made the turn. The aircraft groaned under the shift, but it responded. She looked toward the captain, who was now slumped further in his seat. Blood had dripped from his temple onto the collar of his uniform. She considered asking for help again, but stopped. Was her plane now? With one engine gone and the other weak, Jenna needed to keep altitude and speed perfectly balanced. Too much throttle would risk burning the remaining engine. Too little, and they'd stall mid-air. She checked the terrain maps. On the flight display, mountains surrounded Kalispell on 3 sides. The approach was going to be dangerously narrow. One wrong angle, one wind gust, one slight miscalculation, and they wouldn't make it. A knock on the cockpit door made her flinch. A flight attendant peeked inside. Her eyes widened when she saw Jenna at controls. Ma'am? The passengers are panicking. Some are praying. Others are recording goodbye messages. What should I tell them? Jenna swallowed. Her heart thumped in her chest. Tell them to breathe. Tell them someone is flying who doesn't want to die either. And tell them we're going to try. The attendant nodded slowly and closed the door. Jenna stared straight ahead, gripping the yoke tighter. Every muscle in her body was locked, but her mind was crystal clear. Her voice returned to the headset. Seattle Center, this is Flight 619. Requesting priority landing and emergency medical on arrival. And please advise the ground team, this approach will not be textbook. The controller's voice softened. We're with you, Jenna. Everyone's with you. She adjusted the trim slightly and began the descent. Outside the windows, clouds parted to reveal the shadow of the Bitterroot Mountains. Wind gusts played against the wings. The failing jet bucked and swayed. Jenna leaned forward. Not today, she whispered. Not like this. She didn't need to be perfect. She just needed to get them down a live dot, and she wasn't going to stop until she did. Jenna Morales adjusted the yoke gently as Flight 619 began its slow, uneven descent toward Kalispell. Every second in the cockpit felt like balancing on the edge of a blade. The aircraft creaked under pressure, but she kept her hands steady. Her headset buzzed softly with background noise from Seattle Center, but all she truly heard was her own heartbeat thudding in her ears. She kept one eye on the fuel gauge ticking, down in dangerous increments, and another on the engine status. Engine 1 was completely dead. Engine 2 was barely functioning, struggling to keep them in the air. Jenna knew they were flying on borrowed time. Every minute they stayed airborne narrowed their options. Seattle Center. What's weather? At Kalispell? She asked. Winds from the west at 14 knots, scattered clouds, visibility 10 miles. Runway 13 is clear for emergency landing. Ground crews are standing by. Copy that, Jenna replied, switching her attention back to the panels. She reached up, flicked 2 switches to recheck hydraulics. The controls responded, sluggish but still functional. The captain stirred beside her, his voice groggy. You're flying smooth. Better than I expected. Jenna didn't take her eyes off the instruments. Save your energy, Captain. You're hurt. I know. But I've flown this plane 30 years. Never thought I'd ride shotgun to a civilian. She allowed herself a faint smile. Technically, I dropped out of flight school. So I might not even qualify as civilian. He chuckled, then winced in pain. Either way, you've got guts. Behind them, the cabin remained tense. The murmurs, prayers, and soft sobbing filtered faintly through the reinforced cockpit door. Jenna couldn't see their faces, but she felt their fear, and she carried it with every control adjustment. She glanced at the altitude. 16,000 feet. Still too high for a short, unpowered glide. She needed to slow their descent without losing lift. Every move had to be deliberate. Seattle Center, we may need to extend our approach slightly. I don't want to come in too fast. Understood. Adjust heading 5 degrees south to initiate longer approach vector. Kalispell Tower will take over in 5 minutes. Jenna turned the yoke slightly. The aircraft obeyed. Suddenly, a loud knock echoed from the cockpit door again. The same flight attendant from before entered, her hands trembling. Ma'am, Jenna, we have a passenger in row 9. He's a retired Navy pilot. Says he could help. Should we bring him? Jenna considered that for a second. It was tempting having someone beside her, someone who had logged more hours than she ever had, but she also knew distractions were dangerous. At this point, even minor mistakes could cost lives. No, she said gently but firmly. I appreciate it. But I'm already locked into this aircraft's feel. One more person up here could throw it off. Just ask him to brace, and thank him for offering. The attendant nodded and left, closing the door softly behind her. She returned her focus to the approach vector. The cockpit display now showed the terrain ahead, mountains narrowing dangerously on either side. The valley was tight. Kalispell Airport sat in the middle like a tiny silver thread. Altitude 11,000 feet. Fuel remaining 8 minutes. Jenna did the math in her head. At this descent rate, she could reach Kalispell, but it would be close. Too close. Kalispell Tower, this is Flight 619, she radioed, requesting clearance to begin final approach. A new voice crackled in. Flight 619, this is Kalispell Tower, you're cleared for runway 13. 1 steady. Emergency crews standing by. Everyone's watching, Mom. Jenna blinked at that last part. Everyone's watching. No pressure. She adjusted flaps to 15 degrees. The aircraft dropped slightly, but held. The remaining engine whined loudly as it struggled to keep them level. Captain, gears manual, right? He nodded weakly. She reached down and yanked the lever for the emergency landing gear deployment. There was a horrible groan, metal grinding. Hydraulic pressure failing, and a loud thunk. Jenna checked the indicator. Gear down and locked. Relief surged through her veins. But only briefly. The aircraft now began to shudder violently. Warning lights flashed again. The last engine coughed once. Twice. Jenna's jaw clenched. Not now, not yet. She pushed the nose forward just slightly, letting gravity assist the descent, while relieving strain on the power plant. Kalispell was now visible in the distance, a narrow strip surrounded by pine trees and open fields. She had one shot. The captain stirred again. This is the part where most students panic. Jenna grinned without humor. I've had 2 years to be scared. Now I'm just flying. The tower came back on. Flight 619, you are clear to land. No traffic. All eyes on you, Godspeed. She clicked the mic once and leaned forward. As the runway grew larger in the windshield. Her body locked into memory. She remembered every check ride, every simulator session, every final approach she ever trained for. She had never landed a commercial jet before, not like this. But she had studied the process until it was etched into her bones. Final flaps, extended. Speed brakes, armed, trim, adjusted, approach, committed. The last few hundred feet would decide everything. Jenna took one breath, just one, and held it. Come on, girl, she whispered to the plane. Let's finish this together. Then she guided it downward toward Earth, toward fire trucks and flashing lights, toward a narrow thread of concrete that might, if she did everything right, save 181 lives. The jagged silhouette of the mountains cut across the sky like the edge of a broken bottle. Flight 619 descended through the thinning clouds, gliding on one wounded engine and the willpower of a woman who had once walked away from flying entirely. Jenna Morales squinted through the cockpit windshield, gauging the approach. Kalispell Airport was just visible in the valley below, a narrow strip of salvation surrounded by thick pines and encroaching terrain. Her hands were firm on the yoke, her grip steady. But inside, her mind was racing. Altitude, 7,400 feet. Fuel, remaining, less than 5 minutes. Distance to Kalispell, 12 miles. It wasn't enough. The calculations didn't lie. At her current glide ratio, with only partial thrust from engine 2, they weren't going to reach the runway. She could force the descent nose down, speed up, but that would kill lift and make any landing attempt suicidal. The captain stirred next to her, his voice thin. What's the call, Morales? She didn't answer at first. Her eyes were locked on the terrain map. Beyond the airport was nothing but forest and hills. Closer, to the south of the valley, was a stretch of Highway Route 93, 2 lanes wide, empty in places, snaking straight through flat terrain. A risky move, but not impossible. She keyed the mic. Kalispell Tower, this is Flight 619. Be advised, we may not make the runway. Requesting clearance for emergency landing on Route 93. Repeat, highway emergency landing. There was a pause. Then came the tower's reply. Confirmed. Flight 619. Ground units are already responding. Highway patrol is clearing traffic. You are authorized to divert. Jenna exhaled sharply. Copy that. She reached over and adjusted the flaps. The aircraft's nose dipped further. Airspeed increased slightly. The terrain was getting closer. The trees more detailed. The final decision had been made. Behind the cockpit door, passengers were holding hands. Some were praying, others crying, many silently staring out the windows. No one knew what to expect, only that the plane was going down somewhere it wasn't supposed to. In the cockpit, Jenna's face was hard with concentration. She tapped the rudder gently, aligning the aircraft's nose with the approaching stretch of highway, now visible through a gap in the trees. Come on. Come on, she whispered. From the air, the highway shimmered in the late morning sun. Emergency vehicles raced along it, red and blue lights flashing. Police were already in position, forming a barricade to keep the road clear. Cars had been forced onto shoulders. Truck drivers stood outside their rigs, shielding their eyes to watch the descending jetliner. Some filmed. Others just stood frozen. Jenna radioed in again. Initiating final approach. We are committed. Prepare emergency response. Understood, Kalispell Tower replied. You are cleared. God be with you. Jenna didn't believe in luck or divine intervention. Not today. What she believed in was training, instinct, and focus. She had exactly one shot to thread 138,000 pounds of metal and fuel onto a highway less than half the width of a runway. Her grip tightened, speed brakes armed, gear confirmed down, flaps full. Altitude 1,200 feet. The captain whispered beside her, "I flew a bird into Kandahar once with only one engine and no flaps." "You're doing better than I did." Jenna almost smiled, but didn't. Not done yet. She adjusted the trim again, kept the nose level, and focused entirely on the stretch of asphalt ahead. Down below, one police officer looked up in awe as the shadow of Flight 619 grew larger, eclipsing the road. "She's really doing it," he murmured into his radio. The aircraft descended lower, now just 400 feet above the treetops. A warning alarm blared. In the cockpit, Engine 2's readings dropped. The temperature spiked. Jenna looked at the gauge, then at the road. "Hold just a little longer," she said under her breath. "Don't quit on me now." The engine coughed one last time and died. They were now flying dead stick. No power, no thrust. Just glide. For a full 10 seconds, the aircraft was silent. No vibration, no engines, just the howl of wind against the fuselage. Jenna's heart pounded, but her grip didn't falter. She adjusted the descent one final time, aiming for the widest part of Route 93. She had maybe 2,000 feet of usable space. Not enough for a normal landing, but it would have to do. "Brace for impact," she announced into the cockpit mic. "This is it." The nose dipped. The plane dropped. Hard tires hit asphalt with a bone-rattling slam. The rear wheels held barely. Sparks exploded from under the fuselage. Tires burst. Metal screamed against pavement. One wingtip clipped a highway sign and shattered it. Debris flew. The aircraft fishtailed wildly. Jenna yanked the yoke, fighting the skid. The jet veered left then right, then settled. For 30 full seconds, Flight 619 skidded down Route 93 in a storm of screeching metal, smoke, and chaos. And then silence. When it finally stopped, the jet came to rest across both lanes of highway, half on pavement, half in gravel, but it was intact. Inside, people began screaming, but they were screams of disbelief, screams of relief, screams from the living. Jenna sat frozen in the co-pilot's seat, breathing hard. Smoke rose from the dashboard. The windshield was cracked, but the yoke was still in her hands. The captain whispered beside her, voice weak but clear, "You did it." She didn't respond right away, just nodded, her chest heaving. Outside, sirens wailed as fire crews surrounded the aircraft. Firefighters pried open doors. EMTs rushed inside. Passengers were helped off with torn clothes and tear-streaked faces, but all of them alive. Jenna unbuckled and tried to stand, but her knees buckled. A paramedic reached her just in time. "You're the one who flew it?" he asked, stunned. She nodded slowly. "You're out of your damn mind," he said, half laughing. She smiled faintly. "Maybe." Then everything finally hit her. The adrenaline. The weight. The reality. She sank to the floor of the cockpit, exhaling all the breath she didn't know she'd been holding. For a moment, she was just a girl again. The one who used to sit in her father's lap as he told her about the skies. The one who walked away from flying because it hurt too much. But now she had flown again, when it mattered most. And somehow, she had brought them all home. The smell of scorched rubber, burning oil, and hot metal filled the cabin. Smoke hung in the air like a ghost, drifting through the broken vents and cracked ceiling panels. Passengers were sobbing, coughing, holding on to loved ones, or total strangers. For the first time in nearly an hour, the screaming had stopped, replaced with silence and disbelief. Then applause. It started in row 17. A young man with blood on his temple stood shakily and began clapping with trembling hands. And a woman followed. Then dozens more. The applause wasn't joyful. It was raw, trembling, emotional. A cry of release. A way to say we lived. In the cockpit, Jenna Morales barely heard it. She sat motionless in the co-pilot's seat, arms resting on the yoke, eyes staring straight ahead at the cracked windshield. Her breathing was shallow. Her brain, moments ago sharp and locked in, was now cloudy. Everything that had happened, the engine failure, the descent, the highway landing, it hit her all at once. Not as a memory, but as a weight. A paramedic reached in, crouching beside her. "Hey, can you hear me? Are you hurt?" She blinked slowly. "No, I don't think so." "You flew this thing?" She nodded. "Ma'am," he whispered, "I don't know what kind of training you've had, but I've never seen anything like that. You saved all of them. Every single one." Jenna looked down at her hands, still gripping the yoke. They were shaking now. "I just remembered what to do," she murmured. The paramedic gently helped her up. Her knees were weak, but she stood. Behind her, the captain was being carried out on a stretcher, still conscious, giving orders to emergency responders, despite his own injuries. Passengers exited the aircraft using rear emergency slides. Others helped the elderly or injured through broken service doors. Firefighters sprayed the fuselage with foam, just in case. It was chaotic, but coordinated. And in the middle of it all stood Jenna, smoke-stained, wide-eyed, her aviation headset still dangling around her neck. Camera phones were already recording her. News had spread fast. Local reporters who happened to be near Kalispell arrived just as the first buses pulled up to evacuate survivors. A few tried to rush the scene, but were held back by officers. "This area's restricted," a deputy barked, but the cameras still rolled. Still zoomed in on the young woman in the flight deck uniform, top unofficial, stained, wrinkled. Her hair was a mess. Her eyes were tired. And yet she looked like something carved from focus itself. Jenna walked with the medic toward the triage tent. Inside, rows of passengers sat on cots, wrapped in blankets, drinking water or having wounds cleaned. Every eye turned to her as she entered. Some people gasped. Others simply stared. A little boy stood up and ran straight into her arms. "You saved us?" he cried. Jenna kneeled and hugged him tightly, stunned. His mother followed and nodded tearfully. "Thank you," she whispered. Jenna looked around and saw passengers from every row, faces she'd passed in the aisle, strangers she never knew. And yet, now, because of her, they were still breathing. The FAA arrived less than an hour later. NTSB investigators, too. Uniformed agents spoke with the captain and started documenting the site. When they reached Jenna, they asked for her license. "I don't have one," she said. The agent blinked. "You're not a certified pilot?" "No. I was in flight school. I left 2 years ago." "Then how did you?" "I just flew." Agents exchanged glances. One of them muttered, "We're going to have a hell of a time writing this report." Jenna was questioned for nearly 2 hours. Every detail, every system she touched, every decision she made. The captain, bandaged and sitting beside her, backed up every word. "She knew what she was doing," he said. "Without her, we wouldn't be here. I couldn't move my arm. The co-pilot was out cold, and I was barely holding it together." She didn't hesitate. By the end of the debriefing, everyone in that tent knew who Jenna was. But outside, the world was already finding out. The first news report broke less than 3 hours after the landing. Passenger with flight school experience lands crippled jet on Montana highway, no fatalities. Social media exploded. Videos of the emergency landing went viral. Passengers filmed moments before impact. Jenna's voice over the intercom, telling them to brace. Dashcam footage from a patrol car caught the moment the 737 touched down and skidded along the road. A shaky cell phone video from a nearby gas station showed the fire trucks racing toward the fuselage. And everywhere, people were asking, who was she? Headlines spread like wildfire. Civilian hero lands jetliner. The girl who saved 181 lives. She wasn't supposed to fly, but she did. Television anchors tried to find her background. Old flight school photos surfaced. One journalist tracked down her old instructor, who said, Jenna Morales was the best natural pilot I ever trained. She just had something. He paused. I always knew she'd end up flying again. Just never imagined it like this. Back in Kalispell, Jenna sat alone on the edge of the ambulance ramp, watching the last of the passengers board buses to local hotels. She hadn't touched her phone. She hadn't read the headlines. She just sat, numb, letting the Montana air wash over her. A police officer approached, holding something in his hand. Found this near the nose wheel, he said, handing her a torn sketch. Crumpled, smudged with oil and ash, but still visible. A child's drawing. A plane. A girl standing at the front, arms out, smiling in a pink shirt. On the bottom, in big letters, it read, The Lady Who Saved Us. Jenna stared at it. For the first time that day, tears filled her eyes. Not from fear, not from pressure, but from knowing that, for the first time in a long time, she hadn't run. She'd flown. By the next morning, Jenna Morales was no longer just a name. She was a national headline, a trending topic in every country, and a household hero. News outlets from CNN to BBC were running loops of the landing footage. Commentators speculated on her background, her mindset, and even her future. Social media painted her as a modern-day miracle, an ordinary woman who did something no ordinary person could do. But Jenna didn't feel like a hero. She felt exhausted. She sat alone in a guest room at a small Kalispell lodge, knees pulled to her chest. Her phone buzzed endlessly, but she didn't answer. Not even for her best friend, or the news anchors begging for interviews. The airline had offered to fly her home first class. She declined. She wanted quiet space. Me. A knock at the door broke the stillness. She opened it to find Captain Hollister, his arm in a sling, face bruised but smiling. I figured you'd be hiding, he said. She stepped aside to let him in. I've been talking with the airline and the FIA, he said. They want to meet you. High-level stuff. PR, investigation, maybe even an award ceremony. Jenna stared blankly. I didn't do it for that. I know you didn't. That's why you deserve it. He sat on the edge of the couch and sighed deeply. You know, I've flown for 32 years. I've seen a lot. Lost friends in crashes. Watched passengers panic. Watched pilots freeze. But you? You kept that plane in the air on instinct. No license, no checklist, just guts. Jenna looked away. I thought I left all that behind. You didn't, he smiled. You just waited for the right moment to come back. She bit her lip. I'm not ready to be anyone's symbol. You don't have to be. You just have to keep flying. Later. That afternoon, Jenna agreed to a single press conference on one condition. No stage, no spotlight, just her voice. In a modest room inside the local town hall, with only a few reporters present, she stood behind a podium in jeans and a windbreaker, hands trembling. I didn't expect to be here, she began. I wasn't supposed to fly. I wasn't even supposed to be in the cockpit. I left flight school 2 years ago because I didn't think I belonged. But when things went wrong, all I could think about was what my father would have told me to do. She paused. He taught me to trust what I know, even if I don't feel ready. That saved me and everyone else. The room was quiet. Then, applause. Gentle, respectful, genuine. Reporters didn't push for more. They just listened. That night, Jenna received a call from the Federal Aviation Administration. The woman on the line was polite, professional, and surprised. "We've reviewed the cockpit audio," she said. "Your radio handling, your system checks, your decisions, all of it was exceptional. You performed like a senior-level pilot in a crisis. We're initiating an expedited certification process for you, if you're willing." Jenna blinked. "You mean I can finish what I started? You more than qualified. You proved it." By the end of the week, the Aviation Academy she once attended offered her a full scholarship to return. Letters poured in from commercial pilots, military commanders, and even a retired NASA astronaut. One wrote, "Aviation is about more than checklists. It's about composure, instinct, and courage. You've got all three." But the letter that hit Jenna hardest came from a young girl named Lacey from Nebraska. It was handwritten in pink. Marker, "Dear Jenna, I was scared of flying, but my mom said you were on a plane and saved everyone. Now I want to be brave like you. Maybe one day I'll fly too. Thank you." Attached was a drawing of two girls in pilot uniforms, holding hands in front of a cartoon airplane. Jenna read the letter 3 times. Then she finally smiled. That weekend, she returned to Denver for the first time since the accident. She met with FAA officials for a private certification review. They handed her a logbook with one flight recorded in full detail. Aircraft, Boeing 737-800 flight, emergency landing, Kalispell pilot in command, Jenna Morales, acting. Result, all souls survived. Consider it your first official entry. The examiner said, "Let's get you in the cockpit again." In the following weeks, Jenna trained harder than she ever had. No longer burdened by doubt, she studied every system with clarity. Instructors treated her as an equal. Her confidence grew. Word of her performance spread through aviation circles, and eventually, commercial airlines approached with offers. One airline, Western Pacific, offered her a contract, full training sponsorship, with guaranteed placement as a co-pilot within. The year. Jenna hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of responsibility again," she said. The recruiter smiled. "You already had it. You just didn't know yet." Meanwhile, media coverage continued. Documentaries were planned. A book deal was offered, but Jenna remained selective. She declined any project that dramatized or exaggerated the events. "I don't want to be a character," she said. "I want to be a pilot." Still, one thing did catch her attention. A passenger from Flight 619 started a fundraiser to build an aviation scholarship in her name for girls who wanted to fly but never had the chance. Within days, it raised over $600,000. The board asked if she'd accept the honor. Jenna said yes. And one clear morning, months after the emergency landing, she stood on a stage at the scholarship's launch event, dressed in her new uniform. Wings pinned to her chest. She looked out at the crowd full of students, families, and fellow pilots and said, "I didn't set out to save anyone. I just did what I could with what I knew." And maybe that's what flying is. You don't always get to choose when you're tested, but you do get to choose whether you rise. I hope this helps someone else rise too. The audience rose with her in applause, in pride. And somewhere in the back of the room, a little girl in a pink jacket whispered to her mom, "I want to fly like Jenna." 6 months had passed since Jenna Morales made history from seat 22A. 6 months since the world watched her land a failing 737 with no license. No authority, and every reason to panic, yet she didn't. And now, she was sitting in the left seat of a jet again, this time as an official first officer. Her crisp Navy uniform was new. Her heart? Still carrying weight. Flight 278, you are cleared for pushback, came the voice from a TC. Jenna gripped the throttle, nodded to her captain, and smoothly initiated the procedure. A year ago, she'd have been silent in the cabin, window-gazing and restless. Now, she was where she always belonged. The passengers had no idea the woman flying their plane was the same girl from Flight 619, and that's how she liked it. After the flight, Jenna walked through the Denver terminal, unnoticed, blending into the dozens of airline staff going about their day. But at the baggage claim, a quiet voice spoke up behind her. "Excuse me, are you Jenna Morels?" Jenna turned to find a teenage boy, maybe 16, clutching a worn notebook and a pen. His hands were shaking. "Yeah," she said. "Surprised. That's me. I just wanted to thank you. I read your story in school. I never thought someone like me could ever fly. But I'm going to start lessons next summer. Because of you." Jenna took his pen and signed the inside of his notebook. "Then I'll be the one thanking you when you're my captain one day." His face lit up like fireworks. She walked away with a lump in her throat. By spring, Jenna had completed 400 hours of flight time and had successfully passed every major evaluation. She flew short domestic routes, early morning shifts, and late night runs, working with multiple captains, each offering their own style. But none could quite hide their curiosity. "You really landed that thing?" asked one captain while cruising over Kansas. Jenna smiled faintly. "It wasn't as graceful as I'd like. Doesn't have to be. You walked away. Everyone did. That's what matters." Jenna didn't talk much about the incident. The trauma still lingered in certain smells, in the hum of an engine dropping pitch, in sudden turbulence. But she was learning to fly through it. Every time she sat in the cockpit, she pushed it back further. And each takeoff reminded her why she never really stopped being a pilot. One evening, Jenna received an unexpected invitation from the National Transportation Safety Board. They were hosting a panel on aviation safety innovations and emergency preparedness, and she'd been selected to speak alongside experienced commercial captains, military personnel, and engineers. She hesitated. "Not sure I'm qualified to talk to those people." But her mentor, Captain Hollister, called her that same night. "You're not just qualified," he told her. "You're proof that instinct and courage matter just as much as training. They need to hear you." She agreed. The panel was held in Washington, D.C. Jenna wore her uniform with her nameplate proudly visible. In the audience were representatives from NASA, Boeing, the FAA, and more. When it was her turn to speak, she took the microphone and stood for a long moment, quiet. "I was never supposed to be there," she began. "I had no badge, no rank, no official duty. Just 180 hours in a Cessna and a desperate belief that I couldn't let that plane fall. That doesn't make me a hero. It makes me someone who remembered that fear doesn't have to paralyze you." She paused. "We always talk about skill, about training, about checklists. But let's not forget to train for the moment when those things break down. Let's train people to think, to lead, even if they don't have stripes on their sleeves." When she sat down, the room stood up. The next week, Jenna was contacted by NASA's Aviation Research Division. They wanted her insight for a project focused on cockpit human factors, how stress, communication, and instinct play into critical decisions. She flew to California for a 3-day workshop. On the last day, one of the senior engineers asked, "Would you ever consider training future astronauts on emergency decision-making?" Jenna laughed. "I barely survived a landing in Montana." "That's why you're perfect. Real crisis teaches more than simulations." She didn't say yes. Not yet, but she didn't say no either. Back in Denver, Jenna continued flying. Her schedule grew tighter, but so did her instincts. Passengers noticed how calm she sounded over the PA. Flight attendants spoke about her precision. Her captains trusted her more with each flight, but the moment that marked a true shift came during a stormy approach to Dallas. The captain was flying. The crosswinds were vicious. Suddenly, the captain's hand froze on the yoke. Something's wrong, he muttered. That left rudders not responding. Wait, he stuttered, losing orientation. Jenna took over instantly. Engaging autopilot disconnect. We're coming in hand fly. She adjusted the trim, rebalanced the throttles, and guided the aircraft in. A rough touchdown, but safe. The captain looked at her, stunned. You didn't even flinch. I've been here before, she said simply. The crew clapped when they parked at the gate. One of the attendants whispered, You saved us, didn't you? Jenna nodded once. We all did. Word of that landing spread internally, not because it was dramatic, but because it was controlled. Jenna Morales flies like she's been doing it for 30 years. One pilot told a training supervisor. And she listens like someone who's still learning. That combination earned her fast-track status set to become captain within the next 18 months. A rare feat in the commercial aviation world. Still, Jenna kept her head down, focused, grounded. But one night, she walked onto her balcony, looked up at the sky, and saw a light trail from a passing plane. And for the first time since it all began, she allowed herself to whisper, I belong here. The moment Jenna Morales had been waiting for finally arrived on a crisp autumn morning. The flight crew briefing room at Denver International buzzed with energy and quiet respect. Colleagues, trainers, and senior captains gathered to witness the promotion ceremony. Jenna sat quietly, hands folded on her lap, the weight of the past year pressed lightly on her shoulders. The flight instructor who had once doubted her ability now smiled from the front of the room. The captain from Flight 619 stood nearby, nodding approval. When her name was called, Jenna rose and stepped forward. The chief pilot pinned a gleaming captain's wings to her uniformed chest. The room erupted into applause. Welcome, Captain Morales, the chief said warmly. Your journey has been extraordinary, and it's only just beginning. Jenna looked around the room, eyes catching faces of friends, mentors, and new pilots she'd inspired. For the first time, the weight felt lighter. Her past, her doubts, her fears, all of it had been transformed into something powerful. That first flight as captain was scheduled for a clear, routine run to Phoenix. The passengers on board didn't know their pilot's story, nor did they realize the history being made in the cockpit. Jenna settled into the captain's seat, hands steady, heart calm. She ran through the pre-flight checklist with methodical precision, speaking clearly with the first officer and crew. Everything was in place. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Jenna glanced out the window and thought of Flight 619, the engine failures, the emergency landing, the lives saved. She felt a quiet gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. With a deep breath, she pushed the throttles forward and lifted the aircraft into the sky. Later that week, Jenna was invited to speak at a conference for young women aspiring to careers in STEM and aviation. She stood on stage before a packed auditorium, facing thousands of faces eager to hear her story. I wasn't supposed to fly that day, she began. I was just a passenger, unsure of my place in the sky. But sometimes, life hands us moments where we don't get to choose, moments where courage must come before confidence. She paused, scanning the crowd. Flying saved me. But it also taught me that it's okay to be scared. It's okay to doubt. What matters is what you do next. The crowd erupted into applause. Afterward, a young woman approached Jenna, eyes shining, You're my hero. You showed me that I can be more than I think. Jenna smiled, touched. You already are. As the months passed, Jenna's reputation grew not just as a skilled captain, but as a mentor, a leader, and a symbol of resilience. She volunteered at aviation schools, helped develop new pilot training programs, and championed mental health. Support for flight crews. Her scholarship fund blossomed, helping dozens of young women take their first steps into the cockpit. Yet, despite the attention and accolades, Jenna remained grounded. She knew that flying wasn't just about skill or titles. It was about responsibility, about every person trusting you to bring them home. Her greatest joy was watching students discover their wings, much like she had. One quiet evening, Jenna returned to the small airfield near her childhood home. The hangar was empty, bathed in golden sunset light. She walked to her old Cessna, weathered but beloved, and ran her hand along its fuselage. Small smile crept onto her face. This was where it all began, where dreams were born, where courage had been found. Jenna climbed into the cockpit, settled into the familiar seat, and started the engine. The hum was steady and comforting. As she taxied onto the runway, she whispered, "Thank you." The plane soared into the sky, leaving a trail of hope behind. And Jenna Morales knew no matter what came next, she was ready. Because sometimes the greatest flights begin when you least expect them. The end.